Well, good afternoon, Michelle.
Hi, Betty.
I'm really excited to have this, to start this two-part podcast
Yes,
on communication. It seems to be the most important thing that my clients, I'm sure your clients, want more of
yes,
because they're always trying to refine it, right? And so,
exactly. Uh,
yeah.
and there was a training I did not too long ago. The company had actually brought me in to do leadership training.
Mhm.
And when I was poking around, figuring out what was going on, had them give me a tour of their facility. Uh, we came to this one section and they were in the process of renovating it. And I thought, oh, well, this is good. You know, they're expanding, they're renovating. That's great. And they told me the reason why they had that renovation going on is because they used to use it as a supply place where they had parts and things for different machines because this is a manufacturing spot. But they moved that all off location, and they were literally having to rent out space for all of for storing all of these parts and pieces. And I asked them, oh, I said, well, why did you run out of space here? Why are you doing this? And they said, no, we didn't run out of space. The problem is people would take parts and not bother to document that anything was going on and wouldn't tell anyone. So the lack of communication within that organization was costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars, in lost productivity, because when they would need a part and they didn't have it, they'd have to halt the entire process, and B, in renting out a space somewhere else to house all of these parts and pieces, and the transportation to get them back and forth between their location and the offsite. So it just lack of
Costly.
communication.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, it can cost companies just tons of money. Yeah.
So that there's a lack of communicating what the pieces were, where they were, and so forth was causing sort of a mess, huh?
Yes.
And a
Yes, it
lot
was.
of stress. Yeah. And that brings us to our point. I mean, did the leadership craft, communicate clear problem statements and exactly what they wanted to happen and what would be the outcome if it didn't happen?
Right. And that's the problem, is it all starts with leadership. We both know how important leadership is, and we both know how important communication is for leadership. And you're right. If the leaders don't bother to clearly state what the problem is, then people aren't going to have a very good understanding of why they need to do what it is they need to do.
Well, and the chances are they say, well, that's not my job
Yeah.
because my job is to do this. But in a lot of managers and executives, they don't always give the whole picture and what the unintended consequences are if some things don't happen in the process or they break down. And a lot of that is because of communication, because people don't understand that they're part of a bigger picture. It's just not their little part of the woods where they should communicate. And I'm not being condescending, it just happens. And it happens more, I think, in organizations where there's lockstep, like in the federal government or
Yes.
any government, or like you said, in manufacturing, where there is a structure to do things. And if there's something different, then people get sort of put off. I mean, they off their feet, they don't know what they're doing, or they forget what they're supposed to do. Yeah. It's well, let's see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the thing about defining what that problem is, you also then, once you define what the problem is and you can clearly articulate that and why it's important to all the people involved, then you can talk about, well, what needs to be done about it. You can start to, when you've outlined the problem, you can also talk about what it looks like to be successful, what it looks like to overcome this particular challenge and issue and be successful within the organization.
That's true. But I think what anybody who's communicating, who's in leadership role, needs to understand how people take in communication.
Mm-hmm.
So just put it, some people just rely on a text, right? An email or something like that. Other people rely on telling them and think everybody hears it. But not a lot of people rely on visual.
Right.
Showing people the whole system in a model, or just, hey, it could be easy, draw a line. I mean, here's where we're starting, here's where you are, but here's, if you don't do, if you fall down, or you don't do this step the way it should, then here's what's going to happen to the next one, and here's what's going to happen to the next one, and here's what's going to happen to the next one, and then it becomes a big mess for all.
Yes.
Or we lose money, or or we lose a customer, and so forth. So yeah, defining the work to be done is really important. So,
I agree. And like you said, a picture can be worth 1,000 words, because when people look at their organization, usually they just see what their immediate impact is, what they're actually contributing, and they don't necessarily understand how what they're doing is going to affect people up and down the line. And when you can communicate with the people within your organization and let them know how their actions will affect others, that there's a ripple effect from what it is that they do, they'll have a deeper understanding of why what they're doing is important and how it contributes to everything as a whole.
Yeah, and it helps people to be proactive, be
Yes.
part of the system. For instance, again, I was in the private sector for 20 years, but I can use the federal government only because it is an organization. It is an entity. And on the projects I was doing was on leadership development. And I had to bring outside contractors in. We had a contract. They were supposed to be paid at a certain time, having done the work. And so it was hard getting the contracts through contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened was I had to get to know the head of contract. And I would go up there and say, this is what will happen if you don't, you'll pass this contract in a timely manner. And if there's a problem, I really would like to know, can we have a meeting? And everybody said, well, how do your contracts go through so fast? And I said, because I communicate.
Yes.
And I build relationships to maybe something that might be a blockage. But other people say, oh, we're waiting on contracts. It will take so long. I go, why does it take so long? But that was the private sector mentality coming into the public sector mentality. And I don't think it's changed a lot. So
probably not. No.
no. So yeah, there are a lot of things to be said about being able to define the work that's being done and first craft the clear problem statements. But there's more to it with communication, and there are parts of communication that people usually need to look at when they're looking, because communication, when people think about executive presence and leadership presence, communication, emotional intelligence are like two, and strategic visioning are like three of the most important things that you need to build as a skill set. And so that's why we're talking about communication today, especially in a difficult world.
Yes. And when you think about leaders out there, and you think about leaders from a standpoint of those who are very good at getting things accomplished, when you look at leaders who have achieved a lot, like you said, communication skills are going to be up there. Those types of leaders are very good at communicating to the people around them what needs to be done. And you're right, they have that vision that they can communicate to people and let them know this is where we're going and this is why we're going there. So communicating with others is going to be an important skill for any leader to develop. And first and foremost, one of the things you need to do is you need to take a look at the people around you and figure out what's their communication style.
Yep.
How do they prefer to be communicated with? Because as a leader, you're going to have to adapt your communication style to them.
But and then on top of that, you need to think about or learn what your leadership style is.
Yes.
And they're like 5 leadership styles. And so
Yes.
certain ones lend themselves to communication, others lend themselves to collaborative communication, and another one is direct communication, which some people really like being directed. So they go hand in hand as to what's your leadership style. And so therefore, what are the skills, especially communication, that I always hated working for a laissez-faire leader because I was always wondering, what I should do. And I'd go in and they didn't want to be bothered to talk to you. But in the end, if you didn't do it, boy, you sure knew you didn't do it. So those people frustrated me a lot.
And when it comes to communications and leadership styles, one of the tools that I use DISC because it helps to figure out what your preferences are, but it also helps you see what other people's preferences are going to be. And like you said, you need to make some changes in your own leadership style and your own communication style when it comes to the people around you, because you need to really understand what their preferences are and what they need to be successful, because the more successful they are, the more successful you're going to be as a leader.
And the good thing about the assessments like DISC and Myers-Briggs and benchmarks out of Center for Creative Leadership is, and there are there are a number of others that we've used, is that they get the whole system. Yes. They ask you to rate yourself, rank yourself, and you ask your some people that work for you to rate you, your boss to rate you, and some external people that are not in your department or on your team to do it. And it's really creates a total picture. And a lot of them in the end, they say, what is it that you have to work on, but what are your strengths? And we talked about it the other day, that your strengths are those things that you want to definitely hold close to you. And there may be some other things you need to improve on that you absolutely need to learn how to improve on. Then there's some that you really don't need to at the time. So,
and I would most certainly hope that communications would be one of those skills that you are good at. That is the one skill I will say, if you're not good at, you do need to work on improving it, because you're not going to be an effective leader if your communication skills are poor.
Well, this is a disruptive time. Layoffs are happening more, unfortunately. Starbucks, Targets, Amazon, where they're closing their brick and mortar stores. They're not closing their online stores. And the other thing is that obviously we have inflation, so our dollars go less mileage. So people tend to not listen to each other.
Yeah.
They think they say one thing and the other person hears another. And therefore, active listening and being transparent are really 2 pieces of communication that a leader should be very skilled at.
And when it comes to active listening, active listening is a lot of work. It really is. It's more than just hearing somebody. It's truly paying attention to what it is that they have to say. It's wanting to understand the other person's point of view. It's paying attention to the body language that the person has. It's paying attention to the tone of voice and how somebody is coming across, because that's all a part of what the other person is communicating to you. And by active listening, you're going to get a better idea of what that person wants to know. In the same regard, like you said, when it comes to transparency, when you're speaking, you want to be transparent in what your point of view is going to be and what you're trying to get across. You certainly don't want to cloud anything or hide behind anything. You want to openly acknowledge what's going on and be transparent as you can when you're communicating with someone.
Yeah, there are two things that are interesting. I worked for a company, a restaurant company that was going through bankruptcy. And the leaders that I liked were the ones that actually were transparent, were very clear about what was going on, what the future of the company was. Were you part of the future? And that's good leadership communication. Other times they just bark out, others would bark out an order and you go, why am I doing that? And they really wouldn't want you to ask that question. So they weren't really transparent. They were more dictatorial directive, right? So, and then you're often not clear when you're under the gun like that. You think you make the assumption that the other person got the message, and that may be happening now during this disruptive time in the post-pandemic era.
And clarity is going to be important for the person who's communicating the message, because you're right, you want to be transparent. You don't want to try and hide anything from the people that you're communicating with, but in the same instance, you also have to be very clear about the message that you are communicating, and make sure that the details that you're giving people, the specifics that you're giving people are very clear and understandable. So that way the message that's coming across is going to be accepted and understood easier.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. That's really a big deal. And I don't think some people don't know how to be clear. And so that's where going to a coach or going to a course that is a comprehensive on communication is a good idea. I coach people to be more clear and to find out what their style is, and to also listen, like you said, to what the other person is saying. So you really need to have you have to have the ability to ask open-ended questions. So you and pause. You may know the answer, but shut it out of your mind and go blank and listen to really what the other person is saying. Because on occasion, what happened is when a person asks the open-ended question, the person they thought wasn't going to answer it very well, that they would have to answer it for them, actually answered it even better than what they had in mind. And they were surprised. And I said, well, they're doing that job. You have to let them do the job, but they also need to participate in the conversation about why they're not doing that job. What do they need from you to do that job? And therefore, in many instances, they avoided an EEO suit. So it's like, okay, that's good. Let's not go through that whole mishmash of having to go through labor relations and so forth. So, and again, breathe. I was told, breathe, Betty. Take a breath. You don't have to go, but take a breath, pause after you ask something like, tell me more. I use that a lot. And I used that a lot when I was a manager, or explain what you mean. And sometimes we have terms and concepts that both people don't understand. So you can say, could you clarify this term or this concept and how it works, for us?
Exactly.
So it's letting them be part of the conversation.
Yes. And like you said, once you say, tell me more, or could you explain what that means to me, to you, to just stop and just take a step back and let them come up with the answer. Let them fully answer the question and listen to what it is that they have to say. That's the reason why you're asking open-ended questions, is to draw more information out of people.
And when you and I work with our clients, I'm sure we say, look, I know it's taking a longer time up front or in the middle because you've had to stop doing something because it's not working. But if you take that time and both of you take down what you've said, then you'll have a stronger implementation of
Mhm.
what you want them to do, or they are able to change their performance direction, which will be better up.
Right.
Better. So
Right. One of the points that you had brought up earlier was about emotional intelligence.
mhm.
And when it comes to emotional intelligence, empathy, or being able to empathize and understand how somebody is feeling, put yourself in their shoes and think of this from their point of view. This is one of the communication skills that several leaders are lacking. This is when it comes to being able to empathize with, not just to be able to sort of kind of understand, but to actually empathize with the people around you and what's going on. Like you said, in this time of we're through the pandemic, but there's a lot of disruption going on. There's a lot of change happening, and some people do not do well with change. And as a leader, you need to be able to show some empathy when it comes to those types of people on your team.
Yeah, and if they're afraid of change, sometimes they'll just stand in place and go, I hope they don't see me because I
Yeah.
really don't know what to do, or I don't want to do that. And so again, you ask when you're coaching a manager, you say, look, show some empathy and say, well, what should I do? What do I tell them that they're good? I say, no, you think about what they actually have done that they're doing well, and that you see this maybe, or see it as a strength that would lend itself to getting the job done, and tell them that, hey, Bill, I saw the other day that you were telling Jane how to create this program. And she looked confused at first, but she came out saying, I can do that. You are very good at helping, people who in your division that know how to, are confused, help them with the critical information they need to be able to complete the job. However, I've noticed something else. And then you go into that, and then you start asking open-ended questions. What is happening? Tell me what's going on. Share. I like this one. I've observed this. Share with me what you're thinking. Type of thing. And you're right. That emotional intelligence has a lot of things, but it's more about self-awareness.
Yes.
And being aware of others.
Yes.
And then what emotion you use to react to it. I mean, I told people, I said, look, there's a time to be directive in your communication. I said, if the fire bell rings and you smell smoke and people say, there's a fire in the cafeteria, are you going to say, should I leave? Well, some people didn't leave a couple times in the agency, and they got points for that because it was a small fire in a trash basket, but it could have been worse. They should have done that. So I say, tell them, be direct, get out of here. I said, that's when you can tell them, get out of here.
Emergencies are always the time for direct communications.
Yeah.
However, when you are working one-on-one with one of your employees, when you're coaching them, or when you are giving them feedback on a project that they just did, that's when it's time to use the empathy. That's not necessarily the time for the direct communication. That's the time to tap into your emotional intelligence skills and use the empathy that you have for them.
And when they start saying, I'm telling you, you have to do it this way. No, that's not using empathy. That's not even respecting what they can do. So, and I do that, I want you to do this. There are other ways to say it with the same push, but that won't close the other person down, because they figure you're telling them what they have to do, and they believe they should be able to, they're an adult and should be able to do it. So.
And part of that empathy and emotional intelligence is being able to read people's body language, being able to key in on not just the words that people are saying and what they're choosing. However, being able to take a look at their body and how they are saying what it is that they're saying.
That's a good point. And, it's different, a little different today, though. A lot of people are either like we are on Zoom, or they're just working through telecommunications still because, it's easier, or that's what their system is better at. And I mean, I still telecoach. And to me, people say, how do you know? How do you know what they're thinking? And I say, and how they're feeling and what their body language is. I said, I listen to the other four senses. I listen to what the tone of their voice, the things that the words they're using, and a little bit of, well, just a little bit of how they are entering a sentence. Is it really staccato, or is it that they aren't sure and there's sort of leading into it? And then, for example, I had I was amazed. I had coached a client for 4 hours, and we only had 1 more hour left, and confidence kept coming up, and he's a supervisor. Confidence coming up. I'm not sure I'm confident. I'm not sure. And yet he'd tell me exactly what he's going to do. So I said, can I send you an article on executive presence? So I sent him an article on executive presence, and we started talking on the last day. And I thought, I wished I'd sent it on the second day, but he was different. If I had been in the office, he would have been sitting up straight, sitting forward, and having the coaching conversation we have of how it made a difference. And this is how he used it. And I could actually hear the tone in his voice had totally changed. So I'm just saying, if you're remote and you can't get a video of that person, there are other things that you can listen for and use your open-ended questioning and empathy to be able to make that a whole conversation.
Yes. And like you said, you need to pay attention to the tone that people are using. And when it comes to the choice of words that people have, how they're saying it is going to be just as important as what they're saying. And a lot of people don't realize that when you're communicating, the words themselves are really just a small part of what it is, of the message that you're communicating. The tone, the body language, that makes up a far greater part of the message itself.
Yeah, I mean, you and I probably done this. We've gone into the office of a boss, and since they're different, I had one boss, and she, was really, her body language, you could tell she wasn't happy. And then her tone was very directive and pretty much punitive. And I was like, what's with her? And so you wouldn't get you wouldn't get what you wanted because you were emotionally distraught to set were wary of how she was going to treat you and what she was going to say and so forth. So she lost the ability to have me be able to do the job that she wanted first time around. And so you have to be on yourself too. How are you going to respond to certain things?
So, and the other thing that you also need to be aware of is how you give and how you receive feedback from other people. I'm in Toastmasters, and in Toastmasters, one of the important parts of giving a speech is not only how you give the speech, but it's the feedback that you receive so that you can make improvements the next time you speak. And a lot of leaders don't think about receiving feedback as much as they think about giving feedback. They think they're constantly needing to tell people what changes need to be done, and they forget it's a two-way street, that people can give them feedback to help them improve their leadership skills.
I think if you're a leader who has a difficult team and they haven't been performing, and really they're much in conflict, right? and they appear to don't like each other very much, and they definitely aren't sure about you.
Mhm.
You know, I suggested to one of those team leaders, I said, go in there and ask them, what do you want to do with this project?
Mhm.
And she said there was so much silence in the room. And she said, no, I have this flip chart. I'm going to list all the recommendations that you have. And bam, they just started talking. And then later they came out of the meeting and said, thank you very much. Can we have another meeting like that? And she said after that, the team had no conflict. They were like ready to work and do things. So it was just something as little as that, asking for information and asking what can I do better to help you? So
and and being genuine about it when you're receiving feedback, thanking the person for the feedback that they're giving you, and genuinely wanting to use it to make improvement. And it's the same with when you're giving feedback, being thoughtful about it, thinking about what could help that person in the future, and saying it in a way that they are open to receiving that feedback.
yeah, that's important. And also understanding what's going on externally,
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, in some environments, people don't want to talk about it. In other environments, they want to talk about it so much you wish they didn't. So it's like, if they don't want to talk about it, you sort of need to sort of read the body language, see if there's something bothering them first. You have to open them up. And you don't want it to be totally personal, but it needs to be, you know, something that's going on in their life that they are distracted from, and so haven't been doing the job that they should. And you know, the fact that you acknowledged it and asked for it makes that person want to receive the feedback.
Exactly. Well, Betty, we've talked a lot about how somebody can improve their leadership by using communication skills. This is part one.
Yep.
Next time, we're actually going to focus a little bit more on communication skills. And we're going to look at what leaders can do to help improve those communication skills and make themselves better leaders, because that's what it's really about. And it's helping your team to do better by communicating well with them, and helping your organization to grow because the lines of communication are open.
And historically, some people have been called the great communicator who
Yes.
led this country. So, you know, and some people actually, Jack Welch was considered that in
Mhm.
GE. And so maybe you could be one of those as a leader, considered a great communicator.
Exactly.
It's important. And we'll look at some other pieces of communication that are a little deeper the next time.
Definitely. All right. Well, until then, everyone, we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks at our next video cast here. If there's anything you'd like us to talk about, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what topics you'd like to hear from.
Yeah, please put it on our Coffee with Two Coaches Facebook group. That would be really great, or LinkedIn group, so that we can put that into the agenda. So have a great week. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Mm.